Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today, we are talking about podcasting on the podcast. So this has been so highly requested. As some of you may know, I did a workshop, a talk in a local work cafe earlier on this month, all about podcasting, how to get your business heard. And it was really about how to create, host and run your own podcast, also how to get guests on your podcast and also to guest on podcasts. And generally it was just about getting your brand message out there. And I was contacted by so many people saying, oh, either I can't make it or I'm just not based in Jersey. So how can I get this information? Because it was a completely free workshop that I did. So what I have done is I then recorded myself giving the presentation to my computer the following week, and that went up on my YouTube channel. And I thought, actually, to reach even more people, wouldn't it be fab to put the whole masterclass on a podcast episode? So that is what we are doing today. Before we dive into it though, I just want to say I cannot believe that it is the end of November. It is absolutely insane that December starts tomorrow. But on that note, I am super excited to announce that the Confident CEO Journal is going live this week. They have arrived. We are in stock. If you are following me on my TikTok or Instagram at the confident_CEO on both of those, or at Verity Songon, you will know that I had the order of journals arrive earlier this week, and there were boxes all in my hallway, and they are now all carefully counted and stocked and stored up in the office, ready to be put live on the Shopify site and sent out. I'm just waiting for the thank you cards to arrive, and then those will be going out. But thank you to everybody for all of your amazing support. I've been having so many lovely DMs on various platforms, people saying that they cannot wait for the journal to be released. If you take yourself across to theconfidentceo.store, and that will be linked in the show notes below, then depending on when you listen to this, if the store is not yet live, then you can plug in your email address and I will notify you the second that it comes up. Or if you're listening to this a little bit later on, then head over to theconfidentceo.store and you will be able to order your journal. It's amazing. This has been a fantastic few month journey bringing the journal to fruition. And I think I'll do a podcast episode in the future, actually just reflecting on that journey, just for anyone who's interested in bringing something, e-commerce or a physical product to life there. But in the meantime, let's crack on with the episode. This is the masterclass of podcasting, how to get your business heard. Enjoy. Hey there, I'm Verity Songon, and this is the Confident CEO podcast, the show that takes you behind the scenes of starting and running your small or not so small business. We will cut through the misinformation and bad advice about starting and running a business and give you actionable tips and advice that you can implement to grow, scale, and achieve your business goals. Let's dive in. Hello there, everybody, and welcome to this masterclass, podcasting, how to get your business heard. I'm really excited to be bringing you this free masterclass today because, we're just going to dive into all the goodness of podcasting. I'm Verity. I'm the host of the Confident CEO podcast, which is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, literally everywhere where you can get your podcasts. The Confident CEO is there. It is the podcast that really takes you behind the scenes of setting up and running your own business. You can follow me on Instagram at Verity Songon. And whilst you're listening to this masterclass, I would absolutely love it if you could screenshot your favorite bit, tag me on Instagram as well in your stories, whatever. Tell me which bit you really enjoyed about this masterclass and what resonated with you or what inspired you. It would be great to hear your thoughts there. So, cracking on. I'm Verity. I am a registered nurse turned business mentor. My background is as a registered nurse specialising in emergency assessment unit medicine, and then moving down to higher education and further education in the healthcare sector. I decided to set up my own business in February of 2022 to help women mainly escape the 9-to-5 and to do business on their terms. And since February 2022, this recording is being done in November of 2022, my business has expanded into three main strands. I've got the coaching, the planner and journal range, which is coming out later this month, and also the Confident CEO podcast. The podcast, I am so excited. It only started in April of this year, and already it has ranked in the top 250 podcasts for its category in the UK, in Australia, Switzerland, and also Latvia, which is amazing, absolutely incredible. So thank you to all of my lovely listeners globally, but particularly in those 4 countries, which have helped us rank in the top 250. We have received over 500 downloads in the first 7 months, which is, again, just something super, super exciting for the podcast journey generally. So some podcast facts and statistics before we get started. First of all, the top categories of podcasts are known as comedy, news, society and culture, and also true crime. There are 383.7 million podcast listeners globally. It's a lot of people. Each week, more Americans listen to podcasts than have Netflix accounts. The United States accounts for 47.9% of podcast listeners, and followed by the United Kingdom with 6.3% and Canada with 5%. So we can see that our lovely colleagues over in America are the biggest podcast listeners globally. Apple Podcasts is the most popular podcast directory, with nearly 40% of all podcast listeners listening to their podcasts on Apple Podcasts. Over 50% of podcasts are between 20 and 60 minutes long. Less than 10% of episodes are shorter than 10 minutes, and around 17% of them are longer than the 60-minute mark. And as of September 2022, there are currently 2,490,675 valid podcasts, although less than a fifth of those, at just under 500,000, are actually active. What this is telling us is that there are nearly 2 million podcasts out there which are not active. So after the first, third, or 10th episode, whatever, it's normally the first, third, and 7th episodes that podcasts go into what is known as pod fade. They just die, people give up with them, or they move on to a different project. So why did I start a podcast? Well, I absolutely love to talk. I wanted to gain authority for myself and my business. As I said, I set up my business earlier this year in the coaching niche, in the business coaching niche, and I wanted to just, get my voice out there, gain more of an authority with myself and my brand. And podcasting seemed a great way to do that. I love to learn as well, and I have had some absolutely incredible guests on the podcast today, and I've got more incredible guests lined up for later in 2022 and also into 2023. And I get to hang out with these amazing people and learn from them, just like my listeners do. I wanted to challenge myself. I love tech. I love learning new things about tech and new ways to communicate with people, really. And I wanted to challenge myself, and podcasting was something that, apart from listening to podcasts, I knew nothing about the podcast world. So I wanted to challenge myself. So I decided to learn how to podcast. YouTube wasn't for me at the time. When I set up my podcast, and this is just a very personal thing, this is not, for everybody, but for me personally, YouTube was not for me at the time. My daughter was only a few months old. She wasn't in childcare as yet, and my days were spent with no makeup on, hair on top of my head, looking an absolute scruff. Now, I'm not saying that to go on YouTube, you have to have perfect makeup, your hair has to be perfect and all the rest of it. But for me personally, I didn't want to be filming myself pretty much in my pajamas with baby sick on me most of the time. So I decided podcasting was for me. But as I said, that is completely 100% personal. I wanted a personal connection with people. I wanted to get in front of my audience, or in my audience's ears, in a way that just felt natural for them, when they're driving their car or when they're making tea or what have you. So my podcasting journey in numbers, and all of these lovely things on the side here just symbolize where you can get my podcast, as well as on my Buzzsprout website. But I started in April of 2022, and in that time I've published over 30 episodes, had over 500 downloads, which makes my podcast average for each episode completely on average. It is average for most podcasts actually to get between 30 and 40 downloads per episode. So I'm bang on average, which I'm excited for the first 7 months. I've charted in the UK, Australia, Latvia, and Switzerland, as said. We've had 24 incredible guests on so far. 45% of my listeners are in the US and Canada. And I've got a particular fan base, I have to say, in Cleveland, Ohio. If I've got somebody in Cleveland, Ohio, who listens to all of my episodes, and if you are listening to this, please get in touch. I really want to know who you are, because I look at my stats and I get a download every single episode from this one person listening in Cleveland, Ohio. I'd love to know who you are. So if you do listen to this, let me know. 46% of my listeners are on Apple Podcasts. And then generally, let's look at the benefits to me. What have been the benefits to me creating my podcast? I get to talk about and give a voice to the topics I don't think are being documented enough. So particularly in the business coaching niche, I'm not really covering the kind of stereotypical things that you might expect, such as how to make your first 100,000 or, how to build an email list. We do touch on those things because they're popular topics, but I really like to delve into the nitty-gritty things that I don't think are being covered enough. So for example, I've had a cybersecurity expert on my podcast because we know that small businesses are more likely to get attacked from a cybersecurity point of view than any other type of business. So I got a cybersecurity expert on to give really actionable tips as to how you can protect your small business, your online business from cyber attacks. I also have had an international lawyer on about how to really write a privacy policy properly. I've had SEO experts on to really break down SEO, because the point of all of my episodes is to give my listeners actionable tips that they can start implementing either that day, that week, or just as soon as possible. I don't want to be giving people information that completely bamboozles them and goes way over their heads. I want it to be actionable for everybody listening. I get to learn from experts. As I said, I've had some incredible experts on my podcast to date. I get to create a show and a content calendar that I am interested in, and hopefully other people will be interested in as well. I get to make, follow, and sometimes break my own rules, because podcasting, generally speaking, is still relatively in its infancy in comparison to like blogging and YouTube and social media generally. Podcasting is still generally in its infancy. So I get to, really make and break my own rules with it. I've gained much more confidence in speaking to a wider audience, which might be sound a little bit silly for somebody who's worked in HE and FE, because I've spoken to people before, a room of like a couple of hundred people, but speaking to a few hundred people, or even just a few people in front of you, you can gauge people's reactions. It's incredibly different when it is just you, your microphone, possibly a screen if you're recording the visual as well. It's incredibly different because you've not got people's reactions to gauge how you're delivering what you're delivering, your content, your tone, and all the rest of it. So that's helped me gain confidence there. I get to promote my own services and products. I don't have to use paid ads because, I've already got the platform of them. So I get to promote my coaching services and things like my journal. So I've got like the lovely Confident CEO journal, for example, that's coming out later this month. And I get to promote this kind of thing on my own channels. I get to make genuine connections as well. And I have made genuine connections and new friends through podcasting, people who I never would have had the luxury of meeting probably otherwise. I'm in regular contact now with some really, really incredible people, and I have podcasting to thank for that. So you might be thinking at this stage, is podcasting for me? And like anything, it really depends. So you've really got to think to yourself, what do you actually want out of podcasting? Do you want to build a following? Do you want to sell your services, sell your products? Do you want to use it for marketing? Like, what do you actually want to use it for? Do you have the time to invest in setting up and creating content? And I'll come on to time management in a little bit. Do you love the medium? It kind of stands to reason that you've got to enjoy podcasts if you want to create a podcast. And remembering as well that podcasting is not like YouTube. So for example, there's no creator fund when it comes to podcasting. It's not like you get a certain amount of downloads and all of a sudden you can apply for a creator fund, as with views and subscribers for YouTube. There's no creator fund. The listenership and download differs to watch hours wildly. Where I said I've had 500 downloads, I've had some people say, oh, is that it? Because they're kind of comparing that to YouTube videos, which can get the tens of thousands, if not millions of views. It's very different. You've got to think that YouTube is the second biggest search engine globally. So if you want to go and buy something, say I want to buy a new iPhone, I am going to, most likely being me, I'm going to go to Google or YouTube and type in reviews for the new type of iPhone because I want to see what it's like before I go and invest near the best part of £1,000 in it. I'm not going to go on Apple podcasts or Spotify and type in new Apple iPhone review and search for reviews in that way. So people aren't, engaging with information for podcasts in exactly the same way as they do for YouTube. So therefore, listenership and downloads differs very wildly to watch hours. YouTube is a search engine, as I said, and podcast directories, yes, you can use them as a search engine, but as I said, when you wanted to buy something, when you last wanted to buy your new phone or whatever it was, did you go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts to look for a phone review? No, you probably went to Google or YouTube, and if you went to Google, it threw up YouTube results anyway. And monetizing with ads just is not the same at all. So I want to bust some myths first. So first of all, myth one is it's too expensive to start a podcast. And I'm going to say straight away, I don't think it is. You can use things like Buzzsprout, which I'll leave a link below in the description box there. And you can access Buzzsprout for free for the first 3 months. And then it's something like $12 per month. So at the moment, I spend $12 a month to create my podcast. And that is my back catalogue. I get a certain amount of upload hours, and it then sends it out to all of the directories, because you can't just go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever and put your podcast there. You have to have a hosting platform, which is why I use Buzzsprout. It's one of the biggest ones globally. And it, like I said, you can get 3 months for free. I'll leave a link there within the description box. But then I then just pay $12 a month, and that's just continuous. I use GarageBand. I use an iMac, so I use GarageBand to edit my podcasts, which is completely free because it comes with the iMac. I use Zencastr to record my interviews, and again, Zencastr is free and it is amazing. I love it so much. GarageBand is actually what I use for my solo episodes, but Zencastr I use for all of my interviews. And then I use Canva to create all of my graphics, and also for any sound bites that I create for YouTube. The sound bites I create for Instagram and stuff I do on Buzzsprout, because I can do that within my $12 a month. But my sound bites, or the episode sound bites that I create for YouTube, whatever, I do that all in Canva. Now you can use Canva for free. I pay, I want to say like $90 or $100 per year. I can't remember, but I've got Canva Pro. Again, I'll leave a link for that, so you can get a free trial of that for, I think it's 30 days. But Canva, I just think is brilliant. It's one of the best $100 that I spend every year in my business, and I've been using it for quite a few years, because the additional features, I just think for the extra $10, $12 a month is 100% worth it, whatever it works out as. So as you can see, the cost of running a podcast really isn't that much at all. And I use my Blue Yeti mic here. This was about £100 investment starting up, but you really don't need any particular microphone when you start off. People use their phones, for example. They use their their computers, their laptop ones. I think that once you've got the ability to upgrade to a good microphone, but it's not 100% necessary when you're starting out. So myth two, I don't have time to podcast. I hear this quite a lot as well. And time investment, and this is for me personally, but for hosting, my prep can be variable. Sometimes I like to really research an episode. Sometimes it's just a bit more reflective, me chatting. If I've got guests on, I always need to research them. I need to make sure that I know their background and what they do, because I need to ask relevant questions, and I don't want to look like a complete idiot, interviewing them. But recording an episode normally takes me around an hour. My editing takes around an hour as well. Basically, however long the podcast episode is will usually take me about the same to edit it. Now, I have got quicker with that. Initially, my editing was taking a lot longer, but I've now got into a rhythm of knowing how I like to edit, and it's just my own little groove. So it only takes me about an hour. My promotion is ongoing throughout the month. But then when you start off as well, remember you are going to have some kind of time investment for learning new software as well. So if you've never used GarageBand before, if you've never used Buzzsprout, if you haven't used Canva, whatever it is, make sure you do invest time into learning new software. But as you use it, you're going to get a lot quicker. It's like anything. When I'm guesting on podcasts, or when you're guesting on podcasts, remember there is prep as well. Your prep time can be variable, but do allow time to consume at least a couple of episodes before you guest on a podcast. Make sure you listen to some of their episodes first, because it is so obvious when you have guests on who have never listened to your podcast, or who have never listened to the podcast that they're guesting on. It's so obvious, because you can just, the tone might be off, the interview style might not quite match. So And also, it's just a bit of courtesy to just kind of research what you're going to be going on first. So to record the episode again, it could take up to an hour. And also remember that when you're guesting, it's just courteous to promote the podcast episode that you've guested on as well afterwards on your various channels. Myth 3, podcasting is a surefire way to bring in clients. Well, yes and no. So we've got the stages of a sales funnel here, and I kind of stole this off of Google Images. But right at the top, you've got awareness, and awareness of your brand is really where podcasting sits in. People who listen to a podcast are not necessarily going to go all the way through the funnel and be ready to buy from you straight away or ready to invest with you straight away. Like I said, when you're listening to a podcast episode, you tend to be building up awareness of your company, its offerings, and your brand as a whole, your messaging, your vision, your mission, those types of things. And remembering as well, again, stole this off of Google Images, but remembering as well the marketing rule of 7. It takes an average of 7 interactions with your brand before somebody is ready to purchase. So you can't expect to just go on one podcast as a guest and then all of a sudden all the leads will come in. They might do, but statistically it's unlikely. Similar as how you're not going to suddenly put a podcast out there and all of a sudden be the most booked out coach going. Doesn't quite work like that, but you are building, those 7 connection points. You're building connection points with people. But basically, don't expect, as I said, to go on a podcast or host a podcast and suddenly see the leads to be pouring in your Calendly schedule to just be completely rammed. It does help bring leads in, but it's not an overnight conversion tactic. So let's talk about guesting on podcasts now. So these are some of the wonderful podcasts which I have had the absolute privilege and honor of guesting on. Absolutely loved all of them. If you do look any of them up and you don't see my name on them yet, it will be because they are recorded and they just haven't been published as yet. But why guest on podcasts? Well, it's a great way of getting your message out there without having to deal with the tech of editing and creating your own podcast and what have you. You get to connect with others in your niche with with your messaging. You bring your brand to new people. You get yourself in the ears of a different audience. I would say though, as before, just really prepare yourself. Make sure that you at least listen to a couple of episodes of the podcast that you're going to be going on beforehand, just to make sure that you are prepared for, their interview style and all the rest of it there. So listen to some episodes beforehand, get a style for the, delivery and interview. Is it conversational? I always tell my guests to bring a lovely cup of tea, which I haven't drunk anything yet. I've suggested wine in the past as well, but with the time differences, it tends to be tea or coffee that people bring. Is it conversational or is it very much direct question answer? Just make sure that you know what, so you're prepared, and don't be afraid to ask about the topic that you'll be covering beforehand as well if you want to be a bit more prepared. Provide any information that's asked of you, be that your bio or some media images, whatever it is. Just make sure you provide the information asked of you. And as I said, do your research, listen to a few episodes. I can't stress this enough. Read over any questions you've been sent previously or prior to the recording. Learn the host's name and use it as well. Again, it's really obvious when people just don't do basic research. And remember, yes, you're the guest, but ultimately it is their show. So let them lead the conversation. So pitching to guest on podcasts, how do you go about doing that? There are loads of Facebook groups out there, by the way, which help you do that. But a lot of people, they like to just approach different shows, and why not? But when you're pitching, explain who you are. Sounds basic, but I get a lot of emails from people asking to come on my podcast, and they don't even explain who they are. It's just, I'm Verity, I'd like to be on your podcast. It's like, well, what am I going to do with that information? So explain who you are. What expertise do you bring to the podcast? How are you going to benefit that podcast host audience? What can you offer? Is there a freebie that you can offer? Is there a particular piece of knowledge that you can offer? What is it that you can, like I said, really bring to this podcast? And also be gracious. Remember, there's only 52 weeks in the year. And I say that because on average, most podcasts will produce an episode a week. Some of them do 2 weekly, some of them do monthly, but on average, most podcasts release a new episode once a week. And so that means, if you look at my podcast, for example, there's 52 weeks in the year. That means that at maximum, I've got 52 opportunities to have guests come onto my show. But not every single one of my episodes have guests on. Some of them are solo episodes. So that then immediately diminishes the amount of guests that I can potentially have on my show. And at the moment, I'm recording this in November of 2022, but I have got my first quarter of 2023 podcast guests pretty much mapped out already. So, it's remembering that if people say no to you, it's not necessarily, or not right now, it's not necessarily a no to you personally. It could just be that they've already got their content schedule filled up, or they've already got everything pre-planned, or what have you. Or it might just not be fitting with the direction of the podcast that they're going in at that particular moment in time. It could, I've had people approach me who would be really, really fantastic guests, but I don't want, for example, an entire month of episodes going out which are basically all about the same topic, because I want to give people a bit of variety. So be gracious. There's only 52 weeks in the year, and if you get told no or not now, it's not necessarily you. It could be that you're just not quite fitting into the content schedule, in which case, maybe pitch them again 6 months later if you're really passionate about going on that podcast, for example. But what next for the Confident CEO podcast? Well, my aim is to keep growing my listenership and build up my base of subscribers. So if you do want to, listen to the podcast, just type in the Confident CEO podcast or the Confident CEO on anything on any platform, any of these platforms which hosts podcasts, or you can go to podcast.veritysongon.com. I want to work with my dream guest list. I've got 3 people in particular who I am going to get. I'm manifesting there, but I really want on my podcast. Ben Francis of Gymshark. I love his story. I think a lot of people could learn a lot about the humility that he brings to being a CEO. Fern Cotton, she's done so much around mental health awareness with her brand Happy Place. I'd love to have her on. And Olivia Crabtree is a young entrepreneur who has built her business from absolutely the ground up. And she is just so real and so, I don't know, her energy is just, it's brilliant. She's lovely. I'd love to have her on the podcast as well. So when I say about pitching and inviting people onto the show, these are the people that I'm going to be pitching to. In fact, I've actually already messaged Ben Francis. So, if you know him, get him to message me back. I want to become a go-to listen for female entrepreneurs, generally speaking. But generally, I just want to have fun with the podcast. I've had such a blast in the last 7 months, and I want to keep that energy going, that high vibe going. And yeah, I just want to have fun with the podcast and where it's going to take me next. So some exciting news. The podcast Launchpad is an online course which is coming in January of 2023. Within the course, I am going to be teaching you how to define your topic and your audience, your equipment and tools that you will need to start your pod and run your podcast, how to submit to directories, so how to put something on a hosting platform and how to send that out to directories. Titles and show notes, how to write them. We're going to look at marketing and promoting your podcast, how to find and host podcast guests, guesting on other podcasts, monetizing your podcast, creating intros and outros, the legal aspects of podcasting, and also metric analysis. This is going to be a 3-month course, which, as I said, is launching in January of 2023. There will be a link so that you can sign up to the waitlist, but I'm really, really excited for this to launch. It's going to be so super exciting. If you've enjoyed this session, I would love it if you could let other people know. Send me a message on Instagram or LinkedIn. I'm at Verity Songon on Instagram, or you can just search Verity Songon on LinkedIn. Tell me how much you enjoyed this session. Tell me what your favorite bits were, what resonated with you, what inspired you. If you're excited for the podcast Launchpad, which is coming in January, I would love to know. If you scan your screen now with this QR code, you can get on my newsletter. So when the podcast Launchpad comes out, you will be the first to know in your inbox. And equally, whenever I have free masterclasses like this, they will also go out via the newsletter for you to know as well. And otherwise, I'd love you to come across and listen to the Confident CEO podcast. Leave me a review on Apple iTunes as well. Tell me how much you loved it, what your favorite episode was. Give us a 5-star rating. I would be absolutely privileged if you could. And as I said, shout me out on Instagram as well at Verity Songon. Tell me how how much you enjoyed this and what your favorite part of this free masterclass was. And otherwise, if you have any questions about the masterclass, again, contact me on Instagram at Verity Songon. I would love to hear from you. And thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Confident CEO podcast. Before you go, I would absolutely be overjoyed if you could take just 2 minutes to leave me a review in Apple Podcasts. Reviews are a great way to tell Apple Podcasts how much you enjoyed the show, and it helps the algorithm to push out the podcast to more people, thereby helping us to help empower even more badass businesswomen to grow their inner CEO and grow to be the confident CEO of their business that they can be. I love to shout you out in your reviews as well. So you never know, you might be hearing your name on the podcast in the next episode. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.